Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
And welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Representative Joe Atkins returns, and helping us as we move into our 18th year. Hard to believe.
Wow.
By way of disclaimer, Joe Atkins has been here numerous times, and he's also our personal attorney, so I have to be very careful what I say. But Joe, welcome back.
Thank you, Alan. It's a pleasure to be back.
You are moving, or seeking to move, from the legislature to the Dakota County Commission. Now, I know you've never lost an election. You won 6 straight elections into the Minnesota legislature. Before that, you were the mayor of Inver Grove, among other things. What's motivating you here?
Well, I mean, number one is it's not, the legislature, no position is meant to be a lifelong position. And there's something to be said for having new blood coming into the legislature. We've had about 40% turnover during the period of time that I've been there. But I'm also motivated to go to the Dakota County Board because they face a number of the same challenges, but quite honestly, they don't have the level of partisanship that we have in the legislature. And don't get me wrong, I've had a good run in the legislature. I've actually passed more bipartisan laws the last 8 years than any other state representative. So I'm not saying that it's impossible to do it, but I really like bipartisan or even nonpartisan approaches, and that's what the Dakota County Board does.
Yeah, the Dakota County Board has managed to do that. As a matter of fact, here in Eagan, the city government has managed to do that.
Yep.
And both are highly respected for really doing a good job. And I think when people can get together, even though their philosophies may differ, and iron out and attack the problems, thinking about what's best for my community, what's best for this office, what's best for the people, we can get a lot further than what we see in Washington and really in the state legislature.
Well, and don't misunderstand me, by the way. There are a number of folks in the state legislature that are still really focused on finding solutions, whether they're Democratic solutions or Republican solutions. But there's getting to be more and more folks further and further apart. So there's fewer of us that sort of occupy that middle. In fact, a reporter asked me the other day, how did I pass so much bipartisan legislation? I said, well, it's very complicated. I got to get up out of my desk and walk all the way across to the other side. But it's amazing what you can do if you're willing to have a conversation and attack a problem. But yeah, it's getting to be more and more separated in terms of the political philosophies.
Yeah, I find that the present majority leader in the House is a person who creates problems rather than fixes problems. And you might say, I have no doubt about that. But
well, there's folks with different perspectives. Obviously, there's some folks who feel he's just being very principled in his approach. But the challenge with that is, at the end of the day, you still have to find a solution. And what we're looking at right now, this is a great example. We had transportation and public works. Two of the reasons that we went into session this year, transportation being, by all accounts, by everyone's account, the number one priority.
Desperately needed.
And it was left on the, well, it couldn't get done because you've got Speaker Dowd, Governor Dayton in positions. Governor Dayton is still trying. Even as we sit here today, he's still talking about trying to get a special session done because he so much wants to get a transportation bill done. Speaker Dowd is saying the same thing, but the two just can't seem to find that common ground at this point.
And the budget, where are we with the budget?
Well, we approved the budget and the supplement. So the main budget was done last year. We did a supplemental budget bill this year. That did get approved. There's lots of provisions that were put into the supplemental budget because there was a suspicion that the tax bill might not pass. And lo and behold, the tax bill didn't. It passed, but then it was vetoed by Governor Dayton because you've had about a $100 million error that was contained in that tax bill.
And that $100 million error was the responsibility of shoving that bill before everybody at the last minute.
I was just going to say that the one, I absolutely want to defend the staff that put the bill together, because they are, nobody works harder than the House staff and the Senate staff. They're literally there towards the end, round the clock. We go home at 2 a.m., we're back there at 7 a.m., they haven't left yet. So sometimes we'll be putting in a 15 or 18-hour day. They're literally putting in a 24-hour day. So it's bound to have some errors that take place, but when you drop a bomb of a bill like this in front of legislators with literally sometimes minutes or hours to review it, there was some of the legislation that we got, Alan, that was right at the end, literally 498 pages to be specific, that we're expected to look at in a matter of minutes or an hour or a couple hours. That's ridiculous. That is not how it's supposed to operate. It should never operate that way.
Not when the legislature has been meeting for 2 months.
Or 3 months.
Or 3 months,
which
yes.
was the case, and even though this is the short session, there was plenty of opportunity to put that stuff before legislators and let the public see it.
Well, the purpose of that, from the drafter's point of view, is that we can shove some stuff in here and sneak it through without anybody seeing it.
That does occur. It doesn't occur as often as people think. More often than not, it's just a matter of there's a lot of moving pieces and stuff ends up in there. But certainly I wouldn't argue with you that it occasionally happens from some folks. But what really, and the reason it happens is because you don't apply sunshine to it. If people have an opportunity to see it, the public sees it, the media sees it, legislators see it, then you don't have that kind of thing occur. But you've just described the third reason that I'm looking to go to the Dakota County Board. Everything tends to be out, it's put in the agenda days ahead of time. The materials are there for people to look at. They're posted so that people can take a look at them ahead of time. You never have a situation like that arise, and frankly, it's infuriating. When you're a person that wants to know what's in every bill, and by the way, probably 97.5% of the bills we see plenty of ahead of time. We read them thoroughly, we know what's in them, but the stuff at the end, that has to change. It absolutely has to change.
And I think it will need legislation to change that.
And there's legislation to do it.
Bipartisan support for that, from what I've heard.
I'm one of the supporters. There's Republican supporters. There's folks on both sides that absolutely support it.
So if you move to the Dakota County Commission and you do have a contested election, you will be bringing with you a tremendous amount of experience, legislative experience, authorship of bipartisan bills, just a lifetime of experience which started when you were still in your 20s and you were elected the mayor of Inver Grove.
Yeah, I was raised, my family dating back literally generations. And hopefully I'm raising my kids the same way, that it doesn't matter if you're elected to public office per se, but that you are going to be active in your community and you're going to do those sorts of things that make your community a better place. In my case, it just happened to be serving in the legislature and serving as mayor. But that's something, just a way to give back to a community, and in this case a county and a state that have done a lot for me and my family.
And we talk about some of the bills that you have authored, or some legislation that you're responsible for guiding through. I'm just going to mention Mary and $42,000 plus. Tell us about that.
A lot of people aren't aware that the state is holding $711 million, actually a little bit more than that now, in unclaimed property. And that those funds come from, if you've had an insurance policy that they couldn't find the beneficiary of, or an old bank account, or it's a paycheck that you moved and they were trying to get an old former employer was trying to get a paycheck to you. If they can't find that person, that money gets deposited with the state of Minnesota, specifically the Department of Commerce. And a few years back, we ran out of budget to publish. You maybe remember, it used to be published in the newspaper.
They used to
and
have
people
those,
could go through,
right,
right,
and see if their name
Alan
is
Miller.
there, right.
Didn't say what you had, but it would say your name, and then you could call in and find that you had unclaimed property. Well, we stopped doing that several years ago, and the amount has grown exponentially. Now it's $750 million that's being held by the state of Minnesota.
And that's citizens' money, voters'
That's
money, that should be
Minnesotans'
in their
money.
hands,
Right.
not.
Shouldn't be being held by the state of Minnesota.
So tell us about Mary and the 42,000 plus.
Unfortunately, Mary passed away about 3 years ago. She put a deposit on some senior housing in Inver Grove Heights, and when she passed away, the senior housing facility couldn't find her heirs. They tried, they couldn't find them, so they sent her $42,000 into the state of Minnesota. And lately...
and was there somebody who tried and found those heirs?
That would be me. And we're in the process now of getting that $42,000 to Mary's daughter and son. We set out to literally find everybody locally anyway. I haven't done everybody across the state, but local folks with unclaimed money. And we're sending out letters and we're doing outreach to those folks so that they can get their money back.
And is there going to be any legislation to stop this from happening in the future?
Yes, is the short answer. We've proposed legislation now. Even if I get elected to the county board, I still plan on pursuing a few things in the legislature. One is this unclaimed property element, which is to get people's money back to them. And there's a way that you can do that, which is to give the Department of Commerce the tools that they need so that they can actually do outreach. If they find out that Alan Miller or Sharon Miller have unclaimed property, they'd send you a letter. Right now, they don't even do that. They don't have the resources to do that. And so as a result, we're sitting here and they've got $700 million.
In a state like this, which is really the cutting edge of really legislation or boards or really representatives or whatever, Senate, House, in the country. That's absurd.
We pride ourselves on good government here in Minnesota, and if you look at various rankings and so forth, they talk about how good we do our work here in Minnesota. That's one thing where we really fall down. And if literally legislators are having to go out and track people down, and I might add, it's not hard. It took me about 20 minutes to find Mary's son and daughter. One's living in Colorado, one's in Florida.
It must have been a shock to them.
Well, put it this way, the folks that we've managed to find have been very pleased and often very surprised because they didn't realize, when when Mary put the deposit down on senior housing, her kids didn't know about that. And there's any number of situations that we found where, by the way, I would point out a lot of veterans, an inordinate number of active military and vets have unclaimed property. They tend to, as you might imagine, they move a little bit more often. They've left employment sometimes. There's a past paycheck or something like that. So one of the best young fella that he got, I believe it was like $490, and they were in the process, their washing machine had literally just broken down. They couldn't afford one, and they got $490, so they went out and put that towards a washing machine. I mean, it's Shane Clifton, who was a firefighter in St. Paul who passed away, had unclaimed funds. We're getting that to his daughters. That money should be with them, not with the state of
And
Minnesota.
it's really important. It's important to the families, but it's also a conscience thing in terms of the state.
It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you just got recently a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Cancer Society. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And what's the background of that?
Well, I've had an opportunity to, by the way, I'd give the American Cancer Society and their volunteers all the credit for the award. They were very kind to give me their Lifetime Achievement. It kind of surprised me. I thought I was just showing up for a Relay for Life event and they were going to give me a pat on the back for retiring. And next thing, I've got a big plaque and a lifetime, and it chokes me up a little bit. My mom survived breast cancer. Julia's mom did not. So it's been an honor to work with the American Cancer Society and their volunteers on passing a number of bills. One was to take cancer-causing chemicals out of children's products. We literally found out that in baby food jars, in the lids of baby food jars, there was a chemical that was causing cancer in kids. So we required that chemical be removed. And I've had a number of opportunities over my 14 years to work with the American Cancer Society.
Or you created a number of opportunities, perhaps where none existed.
Yeah, you give me more credit than you're very kind, but it was those volunteers and the families that were impacted that came there and testified. There's moms that were showing up with their toddlers and infants. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, to work your way up into the Capitol and find a place to park and testify and all of the nerve-wracking pieces. I just happened to shepherd the laws through for them.
And I see a Shelby knot in that tie. Don Shelby was in here 2 weeks ago and explained the Shelby knot in the tie that he is given credit for.
Yep.
And here it is.
I do the best. I probably can't keep up with his Shelby knot, but I do the best I can.
Social Security funds should be exempt from Minnesota state income tax.
Yes, they should.
Somebody is involved in legislation in that regard.
I chief authored that legislation. We've got 37 other states exempt Social Security from income tax. Minnesota is one that does not. And whether we exempt it all or whether we do what AARP has suggested, which is at least adjust it for inflation. We haven't adjusted the amount that is exempt since 1984. So that's decades that have passed. If we would just adjust it for inflation, that would mean that couples would be able to exempt $73,000 in income, in Social Security income, and that singles would be able to exempt $54,000. Right now, we start taxing folks at such a low level on their Social Security, and it's not been going up at a high rate. So it should be either exempt or at least adjusted for inflation so that people can keep more of the money that they've paid into Social Security.
Another thing you've been involved with, identity theft, particularly against senior citizens.
Yeah. Minnesota is the #1 target in the country
It's incredible.
for scammers. I don't know how many. Do you still have a landline?
Oh, yes.
Okay. You probably get how many calls a day from folks?
Probably 4 to 6.
Yeah.
Now, I got one. I got 2 the same day this week. Well, this is Internal Revenue calling you,
Yep.
and this is your last call before I don't know what.
It's scary.
Yeah.
That's the #1 most common.
And of course,
scam
I
call
talk
right
to the
now.
machine.
Of course you do.
And I give it 2 words, which is not Merry Christmas. The same with Rachel and
At card member services.
the card member
Yes.
services. And
Yeah. Even
those are just a
Senator
few.
Senator Jim Carlson in one day got 6 of those calls. And if you've got your wits about you, obviously you're not going to be taken in by these scams. But some of them sound really serious, and we've got some folks in Minnesota that are a little bit more vulnerable than others. And these are professionals. I mean, these folks, this is what they do all day, every day. They're based offshore, even though that phone number that comes up on your phone looks like they're in Wisconsin or they're in Minnesota.
And that's really troubling to me because the phone companies have the capacity
Yeah.
to do away with that, and they don't.
Yeah.
So that you look like you get a call. I got one today from, I don't know, Colorado or someplace like that. Well, if it's a number that I don't recognize, I just don't bother with it. But sometimes if I'm downstairs where I don't have a caller ID phone, I pick it up and I get one of these characters with this. It's really annoying. And the phone company, there should be legislation to enforce the phone companies.
Well, not just annoying. We're literally talking millions of dollars lost by Minnesotans. We are, because of the fact that Minnesotans will not hang up on people. We are just so polite. That's made Minnesotans and Wisconsin are the top 2 targets in the country for these sorts of scams, most of which are based in East Africa or in Eastern European countries, even though the phone number looks like it's a 612, 651 type area code.
And the voice
the
certainly
spoofing.
doesn't have an accent. It's,
Right.
you know,
No,
it
these
could be
are-
your next
they
door
are-
neighbor.
They are pros. But what we've tried to do is put blocks and obstacles in between. We're trying to work with the phone companies. They have not been as cooperative as we might want them
Because
to be.
it might cost them a couple
But we're
of
also
quid.
working with the wire transfer. Anybody who asks you to transfer money using a wire service, and I don't want to bash the wire services, but that's a favorite mode for these scammers, is to have you go and wire the money, because oftentimes that gives them the ability to pick it up and not be traced in terms of and be caught. So we've done a
I got
number
another
of
one
measures.
said my granddaughter had been arrested and they needed $490 for bail or something like that. I immediately turned it over to the sheriff and they got to work on it, but I don't know that they
there's-
can find these
Law
people.
enforcement is so frustrated because they see these sorts of claims all the time, but they don't have the resources to carry out enforcement. Or if they do, they find out that they're based in Canada or Eastern Europe
Right.
or West Africa, which makes it awfully hard to arrest anybody doing it. So we've tried to put up some obstacles in between that prevent it from happening to begin with.
And a lot of this has taken place during your tenure in the legislature as
It's-
these things become more prevalent.
It has grown exponentially, especially over the last half a decade, as more and more, and you've got online versions of it as well. But the one common denominator seems to be the wiring of money. So we've tried to work with some of the wire transfer companies to put up obstacles so that the transfers don't occur, as well as with law enforcement and the Department of Commerce.
They tell you to go to Walgreens
Yeah.
and purchase a particular type of credit card, I guess it is.
Yeah.
And you know it's a scam.
Yeah. Well, you may know it's a scam, but the more sophisticated ones, in fact, probably what I would label the most sophisticated is one where they build a relationship with you over time. Some of the I don't want to single out any of the dating services, but some of them, they will end up in kind of a long-distance relationship where a person thinks that they are making a connection with somebody. This goes on for weeks or months.
Fortunately, I haven't been in that picture.
And, well, I hope not. I mean,
in
Sharon's
a
been-
long time.
but-
Sharon would kill me.
But those are and they are repeat customers. They repeatedly scam these people, thinking that they're the person that they've developed a connection with is just in Kentucky or New York, when in fact it's some scammer off in Eastern Europe. So there's a lot of different scenarios, many of which are quite sophisticated.
Let's talk about child care tax credits. Is that something that we have accomplished here in this legislature?
We're getting better with respect to that. We've because we didn't have a tax bill this time. Obviously, it got vetoed. So any of the items in there that were supposed to be helpful obviously didn't get done. And the Governor Dayton, and I got to give the guy credit. He has not given up on the prospect of a special session, and he's still trying to work with Speaker Dowd. In fact, I think this week. I don't know when you're showing this, but I literally think that they're still trying to talk through some solutions to
Well,
pass.
this will be up in Burnsville, Egan, probably next week.
Good.
Maybe as early as tonight or tomorrow.
But there were any number of good tax provisions in there, bipartisan supported tax provisions. And I understand the governor's, when you've got a $100 million error, obviously that's good reason to veto a bill. But it would be great to be able to rebuild that, because there's a lot of good tax tax provisions in that bill that help childcare, and a number of them that would have been very, very helpful.
Now, I was reading in a local paper today an opposition letter pointed to you. And this letter said there are a lot of buildings in Inver Grove that are boarded up or closed as though it was your fault. Well, you've won 6 legislative races, which to my way of thinking is 12 years. And I was wondering what this writer, who was obviously put up to do this, had in mind for somebody who's been out of the community, certainly out of the community hierarchy for 12 years. What are you supposed to do about that? And of course, the answer is it's not your venue any longer.
Yeah, but first, I love letters to the editor, though. I mean, that's more power to anybody that writes a letter to the editor, whether it's opposed or in favor of me. I think it's just a great forum. In terms of my impact on local construction and boarding up of buildings, I haven't been mayor now for 14 years. But that doesn't mean, I mean, one thing at the county, by the way, there's some access issues. There's one particular, it's the old Rainbow Foods store that's been empty for a couple of years, if they had better access. So that's one of the things I expect to work on at the county. The city would like to get that done as well, but the county hasn't been real cooperative.
Well, what I would like is to have some of those places available for dog walking in the winter. You have a big, large store like that that's empty.
Yeah.
Why can't you?
Now that one, though, I don't think you're going to have that opportunity, because the reason that one particularly sat empty for a while is because there was a long-term lease by Rainbow, and the owner, why bother to try to lease it up when you've got this long-term lease it's currently paying? That lease is coming to an end, so it's now being aggressively marketed again. So I don't think you're going to have an opportunity to be walking around in the old Rainbow.
And there have been so many changes in Egan.
Yeah.
And ongoing with what we have to look for.
We are
And,
actually, this is, from an economic standpoint, if you look at all of the various measures that the state looks at in terms of economic health, the economic health of northern Dakota County, Egan, Inver Grove, Rosemont in particular, are phenomenal. We've got extremely low jobless rate. That doesn't mean that some folks aren't underemployed or that perhaps they're not working as many hours as they'd like or with the benefits that they'd like. But we've got, I believe, the lowest unemployment rate of any place in the state, the highest median income, or among the highest median income, jobs being created. In fact, I was just at a grand opening or a ribbon cutting here in Egan last week for a high-tech company. So things are actually going really well in northern Dakota County.
well, and you're on your way to joining them.
I hope so. Well, it won't be for lack of work. I'm out there knocking doors every day, and in good times and
Yeah.
sunshine and
As a
rain,
matter of
no
fact,
matter what.
You knocked our door not too long
did.
ago. Much to my surprise to see you there. Well, Joe Atkins, legislator or commissioner or whatever, we wish you the best, and thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alan.